Welcome to Home, a weekly podcast product of Family Policy Alliance Foundation. My name is Joseph Kohm. I'm the regular co-host of House to Home and the vice president of public policy here at FPAF. And today we're going to cover a major, dramatic, and positive development from around the world related to our Help Not Harm campaign. New Zealand, for those of you listening, where Lord of the Rings was filmed, the government there has announced that it will halt all new prescriptions for puberty blockers for children with gender dysphoria. They did this citing the lack of high-quality scientific evidence for safety and long-term effects. All things FPA has been saying for years in our Help Not Harm campaign, which is why we're so thrilled about this. And joining me to talk about it and what this means for kids and families and Kiwis everywhere is Bob McCoskrie. He's the CEO of Family First New Zealand, which is an organization that's very similar to our state family policy councils around the country. His and his team's advocacy directly led to this ban. So, Bob, we just really thank you for joining us. I want to congratulate you. What a great victory for you also. Thank you for being here. Congratulations.
Hey, Joseph, great to be part of the program, and, love the work of the family policy groups. They sort of adopt me as the 51st state unofficially. So move over Canada, we're the 51st state. But yeah, it was a superb decision for families.
Man, it's really terrific. So you're going to tell us all about it, which I'm really excited about because I think this will really encourage our audience, and we at FPA are obviously thrilled about it. So maybe you could just summarize the decision that your government announced for us at the start, and then basically what the government's doing, what this means for puberty blockers as it relates to minors. Like, what exactly did they do?
Yeah, so just a little bit of history. Obviously, the CAS review came out of the UK. The CAS review found that, puberty blockers, they could improve the benefits of, and in fact, they were aware that they were doing harm to gender-confused children. And they also found that the suicide trope, the suicide trope, if you don't affirm your child as the opposite sex, then they will commit suicide. They proved that wasn't the case, actually. So the CAS review came out. That sort of put a pressure on the health authorities in New Zealand to revisit the research around puberty blockers. Puberty blockers had really been thrust on New Zealand as a result of WPATH, which is the World Professional Association of Transgender, I call it radical activists, WPATH, and there's a New Zealand chapter of it. And so really they just duped everybody, a lot of pressure on medical professional groups and counselling groups. And then they also introduced a conversion therapy law, which criminalised parents, counsellors, pastors, medical professionals who wanted to affirm children as their biological sex, and criminalised mum and dad for affirming their daughter as a girl and their son as a boy. So this was all being rammed down. Then the CAS review came out, and people said, "Well, hang on, wait, what? There's actually a contrary view to this." And then our own Ministry of Health, a little bit like your HHS, did a review of the literature, and they basically came out and said, we cannot prove that puberty blockers are effective, and we cannot prove that they're safe. Maybe we should rethink this. So the activists got involved, but fortunately we had people, medical professionals who were putting input, and we had a government who was willing to say, actually, this is social experimentation. It's medical experimentation on children. We need to put a pause on this. And so they have basically from December the 15th, I think it is, they have said no more new prescriptions of puberty blockers. For those who are already on puberty blockers, they would say, well, you've got new information now with your medical professional, with the family, make the decision of what's best.
Okay. Boy, that's really helpful to know. Great history there, too. I appreciate your summary of that because we've covered some of that on this program, like the conversion therapy laws. About 24 U.S. states have one of those. Those are up on review to our Supreme Court right now. But the CAS review especially we've mentioned as a supporting document, but you did a good job explaining what a dramatic impact that had for countries other than the United States, like in all Commonwealth nations born out of Great Britain, basically. That had just a dramatic impact for good. good. And so this is all just great news, even for the families whose children may be already beyond puberty blockers. The fact that they just finally have all this information and can hopefully make a more informed, healthy decision is huge. What role did you and Family First New Zealand play in achieving this and leading up to it? Like, what were you doing to get us here?
Well, I think we've been constantly checking the research. We've been basically relying on some of the studies, and probably one of the most important ones was the Finnish study that came out last year that looked at the suicide trope and found that actually it wasn't denying kids the ability to change their sex that gave them suicide ideation. It was actually the suicide ideation got worse when they went through the whole chemicalizing and going forward to the castration. I mean, to most people, it's just common sense, isn't it? When you have a confused child, to add to the confusion and then to add chemicalization and then look forward to castration of healthy body parts, none of it makes sense. And yet it was this ideology that was pushed down very strongly. And look, whenever I, talk to key people about it, I would just compare it to the way we respond to anorexia nervosa. Anorexia nervosa is a disconnect between a young girl, the way she sees herself physically. So it's a disconnect between what she thinks to the physical reality. And when you have a young girl who's starving herself and putting her own life at risk, do we get alongside and reaffirm the delusion and say, oh, yes, you are still overweight. We'll give you some weight loss pills and we'll book you in for a liposuction. That's not a pastoral care response, isn't it? We heal the mind. We don't attack the body. And yet for gender ideology, we're supposed to believe that a child as young as 4, 5, 6 years old can determine that they were born in the wrong body and that we should immediately prepare them for, pausing the natural process of puberty, chemicalize them and then castrate the healthy body parts. It's been a grand social experiment. So we've been calling this out. There's been Swedish studies as well. Obviously the CAS review, the great work done in the US exposing WPATH and, the exposure of what some of the WPATH people actually believe. Even the Daily Wire's What is a Woman, I think exposing some of the ideology of academics at the top of this ideology, I think, really threw light on this really dark agenda. And I think probably one of the most important things we did this year was that we released 2 testimonies. We had Kohm from the US over last year visiting New Zealand. And this year we had both Dr. Miriam Grossman, who's been a really important advocate against the gender ideology, but we released 2 testimonies of New Zealanders, Kiwis we call them in New Zealand, and one of them went through puberty blockers and was literally weeks away from having her healthy breasts surgically removed, and fortunately decided to detransition, but is still suffering the costs of the puberty blockers and the effect that had. We also released the testimony of another slightly older female. She started transitioning when she was at university at about the age of 20, went through castration of some healthy body parts and then detransitioned around 25, 26 and is now living in freedom, and a lot of the confusion and mental illness has gone. So those 2 testimonies were really important because they were our Chloe Coles of New Zealand, and they gave voice to really, that voice has actually been criminalized, Joseph, by the conversion therapy law, because what it says is if you want to revert back to your biological sex, whoever helps you do that, we're going to put them in jail. That's what a conversion therapy law is, because what it's doing is it's just ramming down the ideology. It's almost like it's punishment for the disbelief in gender ideology. That's what a conversion therapy law is all about. It's got nothing to do with the well-being and the welfare of young people. It's about criminalizing people who believe you're born male and female. So I think those testimonies really helped give a bit of backbone to the decision makers as well. And just finally, Joseph, can I just say that, look, we've been noting the help not harm. I remember being at the seeding meeting in the US when you guys were discussing that. We, leaped on that. That was so important because I think it's important for us to realize that this isn't just a USA specific or UK specific or New Zealand or Australia or Canada. This is a cultural issue, as especially Christians that are founded, countries that are founded on Judeo-Christian values are rejecting those values. It's only those countries that are going down this wacky road. And so it's a cultural issue. This is the new cultural religion. And we've got to push back, and we've got to speak back with truth and light. We've got to speak in grace and love, because there are people caught in this ideology, but we've got to expose this dark, dark cultural religion.
Yeah, it's really well said. It reminds me of that meme. I don't know if you've seen it, of the school bus that drives across railroad tracks, and written on the school bus is, people will be more open-minded and scientifically driven with less religion in society. And the next frame is the train plowing through it, and the train simply says pregnant men. I mean, because like you said, it's only countries that are leaving behind their Judeo-Christian heritage that are going down with these wacky notions that, well, forget whether men can be pregnant or not. Let's block puberty in kids. I mean, that's the common sense part. I think that people intuitively still understand, that you mentioned, regardless of whatever personal faith they have. I think everybody could intuitively think, well, maybe puberty, going through that, it usually helps kids work out a lot of confusion they have about their body generally. We can all remember that in our lives. But so the idea of blocking that and allowing kids to linger in this confusion and stunting their body's development with permanent consequences, as we heard from those testimonies, I think that is intuitively, people get that, and they think that shouldn't be done. So just thank you for your work in platforming those testimonies and in doing this advocacy, because like you said, that the way you put conversion therapy laws is perfect. It's a punishment for not believing in gender ideology. I mean, I haven't thought of it in those terms before, and that's really true. And you guys courageously defied that to get these testimonies out there. And I just love seeing you all rewarded for it. So I do want to follow up with a question about, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the other really important part of the argument that's important for us to understand, and especially for countries fighting this, for advocates, is that under this ideology, you are basically saying to a 10, 11, 12-year-old that the way they view themselves is correct, and that they can consent to life-changing, life-altering, non-reversible treatments. And look, that is just not care for young people. We don't let them drive. We don't let them sign contracts. We don't let them drink alcohol. There's a whole lot of things we do to protect young people. And yet when they say, well, I want to take chemicals that are going to stop the natural process of my body developing through puberty, when we give wrong sex hormones to think that we can change their sex. And we think that they can do that with consent. It goes against everything that consent is about, because consent is based on fully understanding the decision you're making and the consequences of that decision. Now, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, even 15, we have laws protecting that age group because we understand their brain is not fully developed. They're not mature enough to make those types of decisions. And yet suddenly, I mean, even at 4 and 5 and 6, we're being told, no, if they know they were born in the wrong body, they must be right. They know exactly what they're thinking. They can't even decide what clothes to wear or which cereal to have for breakfast. And yet we're giving them these adult decisions. So one thing that we really pushed, and we got legal advice and put that through to the Ministry of Health and to the Minister of Health as well in the government, is around this whole area of consent. How can a 12, 13, 14-year-old who's only just starting to go through puberty give consent to such a major life-impacting drug? The answer is they can't, and we should stop the social experimentation. It's one thing, Joseph, for drugs to be experimented on you and I if we, have certain proclivities towards certain weird things, but it's another thing to exploit young children who really we should be protecting them because of their vulnerability and their immaturity and their age.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, What a great tactical choice from you and your team to zero in on the consent issue there, because
Mm,
I think that's also intuitive to people. Just like, okay, I want to trust my kids, even the best of kids that
mm,
we all have, but no child, I think everybody agrees, can consent to something so
mm,
life altering, simply because, I mean, they're young people, their brains aren't fully developed, and we apply
mm.
that logic to so many other areas in society. Why should we make an exception in this one area just because a
Yeah.
particular set of activists have banked on it as the core of everyone's identity since the 60s? I mean, it doesn't make sense, and it's a great tactical choice from you all, and clearly it's playing out well. It's working. So I just
Mm,
applaud you for that. And I do want to ask, because you brought up the World Professional Association of Transgender Health earlier. These are radical activist groups. You and I are very familiar with them, but our audience may not be, and I just want to expose them to some of the counter arguments here. One thing that someone like them would say, and I just want to make sure I get this right, because they put themselves out there as a medical
mm,
association, but they're
mm.
just a group of activists, like you said.
Yeah.
Their response to all this is that banning or restricting puberty blockers would actually harm mental health outcomes for people they term as transgender youth. These are young people who are gender dysphoric, and they say that if you allow them to go through puberty from a sex that they don't belong to, then this causes long-term harm. So I know you've faced this argument before, and that's why I'm asking you to tell our audience who may not have heard this before, how would you respond to that specific argument?
Look, if you look at all the international research that has been done, the credible research where there is control groups, where it is peer review, and it hasn't been done by activists, you'll find a common theme, and that is that alongside the gender dysphoria is usually other comorbidities. In other words, other mental health challenges or trauma in the background. For example, autism is seen as a particularly prevalent one for kids who want to change their gender. And so it goes back to the original argument, and I think it was Kenneth Zucker who originally said this, who was, one of the first to have a transgender clinic and then shut it down because they realized that actually it wasn't solving the problem. And he said, you don't cut the body, you heal the mind. And it's the same argument for anorexia nervosa. You don't cut the body to affirm the delusion, you heal the mind. And for many gender dysphoric kids, that's exactly what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a whole lot of other disorders that are going on. And as we've interviewed detransitioners, that's exactly what they share as well. They share, look, there was other things going on in their life, whether it was trauma, child abuse of some sort, whether it was mental health challenges that they were going through, and when those were dealt with, then the gender dysphoria was solved. And that's what the international research would say as well. And look, I think that's the other point of attack, Joseph, is around what parents are being told. Chloe Kohm, when I interviewed her a couple of years ago at a conference that you and I were at, she identified that her parents were basically told, well, do you want a live son or a dead daughter? In other words, go along with the delusion. It was used as a stick on the parents. And when I've interviewed detransitioners here in New Zealand, same argument. That is the weapon of choice being used by activists. They basically say, if you don't affirm the delusion, they will kill themselves. And what loving parent doesn't think to themselves, well, I don't want that. I need to go along with what this medical professional is saying. But just think to yourself, imagine if they were saying that to parents of kids with anorexia nervosa. Oh, if you don't affirm the delusion and starve them of their food so that they put their body at risk, they're going to, be at risk of suicide. No parent would buy into that. They would say, that's not going to help. And yet that has been a stick that's been used on parents. Parents have been put under tremendous pressure in this whole area. They've been told lies by the likes of groups like WPATH, because WPATH are not interested in the rights of the parents, the role of family, the role of strengthening the family. All they're interested in is the agenda of getting kids to trans. And we've just got to call them out for that. And like I say, WPATH has a chapter in New Zealand called PATHA, which is Professional Association Transgender Health Aotearoa, which is the Maori name for New Zealand. I mean, I can't even use the name health in that title. I use radical activist because it's not health. To chemicalize a kid going through puberty and then to cut off healthy body parts, that is not a health program. Puberty is not a disease. And it's time we started just calling out this madness and got back to the reality of biology, which always wins.
Yeah, I mean that's what you, the Family First team, us at FPA are here to do is call that out, and this is where the one other area that's encouraging for our folks with the in the comparison with anorexia is that like anorexia, this is taking some time for our culture to reckon with, but it is trending in the right direction. I mean, we look
Yep.
back on people like Princess Diana who were anorexic years ago. And at that time, nobody knew how to deal with it. But we look back on it now and think how awful that was. Why didn't we deal with this? People are going to look back on this issue the same way. But at least like anorexia, people are waking up to it and realizing this is harmful. We have to stop and do what it takes to protect kids. So what your government has done, thanks to your advocacy, is one of those major steps. I mean, that's up there with, a couple years ago we had 17 states pass help not harm laws here in the U.S. Last year we had the United States versus Scrimetti decision that gave constitutional license to all of those 25 state laws now. So you have that, you have the Cass review in the UK. This is a worldwide movement now. And so that's why I want to ask you to zoom out here and just for a second. Well, tell us, A, what's next for New Zealand on this issue, but how do we make the most of this victory in your home to better move the ball forward on this issue around the rest of the world?
Well, I think that's the key point, Joseph, is that what's made the worldwide news is that it's a so-called progressive, I call it regressive, country like New Zealand that has been very socially liberal, left-leaning on a whole lot of issues. I mean, we've banned spanking way back in 2007. We've legalized prostitution. We had the civil unions and then same-sex marriage. We have one of the most radical abortion laws passed by a woman prime minister who had just had her own child, Jacinda Ardern. That radical abortion law was trumpeted by her while we were all going into lockdown for COVID. To protect vulnerable people, the parliament was pushing through a radical abortion law to put at risk the most vulnerable in our society. We've legalized euthanasia. We've got conversion therapy laws. We've got birth certificate laws where you can just, it says male on my birth certificate. No, I'll make that female. We've got the passport issue. So we're quite a radical little country that's competing with Canada, some of your blue states, and Australia and sometimes the UK in going down this radical path. But here we are, little old New Zealand, actually saying, no, we're going to stop experimenting on our kids. We're going to stop chemicalizing them. We're actually going to get them the help that they actually need. We're going to listen to the science and we're going to respect biology. Now, for a country like New Zealand to say that, I mean, imagine if California said that, or one of your other, radical left-leaning states. It would be news, wouldn't it? And that's why this has been news, because it's been New Zealand that's made the decision. It's not Italy. It's not Hungary. It's not a country that you might say, oh, well, far right government, what do you expect from them? This is New Zealand, liberal New Zealand. And so I think that's what has really stood out. And so that's why I think that, other countries will take a really good hard look, because what they're seeing is a country that has tended to lean left and socially liberal in its policies, suddenly putting a line in the sand and saying, actually, this ideology is harming kids. We can't prove that it's of any benefit, and we can't actually prove that it's not doing harm. And what other medication would we give, or what other treatment would you give to a child where you can't guarantee that it's effective and that it's safe? You wouldn't. So it's just been a grand experiment by a radical ideology with radical activists. It's been called out, and we would just encourage countries to jump on the bandwagon and do what Europe started doing, a lot of states in the US, obviously. I'm not sure if you're aware, but is it one of the states in Canada, one of the areas in Canada actually banned puberty blockers last year.
I
Was it
believe you're
Toronto?
right. I think it
Yeah.
was Saskatchewan because Toronto's very liberal. I think it was Saskatchewan, but I'll have to get back to you on that.
Well, once again, for Canada, that is surprising that they have done that. When you see Canada as the so-called,
Yeah.
they say progressive, I say regressive, country, it means that even groups on the left can actually see through the flaws. That's the other point that I would just make, Joseph, is that I call them co-belligerents. There are groups on the other side who may disagree with a lot of views that we have, especially around the definition of marriage, even around pro-life issues. But they are very strong. Some, left-wing groups, feminist groups are very strong on this whole area that you cannot, they've fought for feminism, and then they're being told, oh, a dude can choose that they want to be a woman as well. And they're saying, forget it. We've fought for feminism. We know what a woman is. And so it's been interesting, the groups that we are aligning with on this issue. And look, we just say to them respectfully, we can agree to disagree on some of these other issues, but on the issue of that only a woman can get pregnant, only a woman can give birth, a girl that is born a girl remains a girl. She can't choose to be a boy. A boy can't choose to be a girl, to go in the girls' changing rooms or to play in the girls' sports. We can agree on that. Let's fight that together. And so we've been locking arms with groups like that, and that has really confounded both the media and the radical activist groups, because what they see is they see some left-wing groups locking arms with so-called conservative groups or right-wing groups, or far right as they like to label us, and the fact of the matter is, all we're arguing for is common sense biology and the protection of children.
Yeah, that bipartisanship point is so important, Bob, because it's a point that allows us to show gratitude to our supporters, really, the listeners to this program, the people that support your organization and FPA. I mean, they're what get us here, and I feel bad for them in a sense because they get pilloried as being, far right efforts or whatever. But something like this happens in a place like New Zealand, and there's just no way to slander us like that anymore. I mean, we have 25 states that have passed prohibitions through a help not harm law on gender transition for minors. That doesn't happen if it's just one political party voting for it. And I have the voting receipts to prove it. So that's where I want to thank our supporters, because it doesn't happen without them to get to a bipartisan issue like this that so many otherwise strange bedfellows wouldn't work together on. But we all agree on this. I think that's kind of the essence of our movement, Bob, this social conservative pro-family movement that, yes, you are the 51st state with. But that's what we do. Is we're not here to be right-wing or left-wing. We're here to be pro-family. And it just so happens that people on both sides of the spectrum and all in a wide range agree with us on that and get us to this point. So to our supporters of both our organizations and the listeners to this program, thank you for getting us to this point. Victories like these belong to you. So to that end, Bob, I'd like you to just finish by telling our audience, where can they find and follow you and Family First New Zealand? Tell us your website and your social media.
Well, look, it's hopefully pretty easy. If you know New Zealand, the two first letters are NZ, so it's familyfirst.nz. And basically, if you go there, you will see all the social media presence that we have. For us, Joseph, we've effectively been cancelled by the legacy media in New Zealand. We've got a very left-leaning media. We sort of don't have some of the alternative voices that you have in the States, or that even the UK or Australia has. So since we've been going 20 years, but probably in the last 6 to 8 years, especially after we opposed same-sex marriage, especially after we opposed the abortion law and the conversion therapy law, and especially when we opposed the legalization of marijuana for recreational use. And we actually won that referendum back in 2020, which was, a major victory, because it went against all the narrative of the media as well as those pushing for legalization of the drug. Since all that happened, we are persona non grata in the legacy media. They don't come near us. They don't want to know our viewpoint unless they want to attack us. So that's where we've used social media to great use. And, the traffic that we are seeing, the hunger for those conversations, just as the same as the hunger for these podcasts that you're doing, Joseph. That is really where the conversation is happening, which is why the legacy media doesn't like social media, because they realize that the important conversations are happening on places like Facebook and even on X, which is my preferred place because it's free speech, and even LinkedIn and others. So we're over all those platforms. Look, Joseph, can I confess, I even go on Blue Sky just to wind up the left, just for fun, just to see what the narrative is over there. But you
must be persona non grata there too, Bob.
Exactly. But I just think often we expect people to come to our message. I think we've got this great platform of social media where we can take our message to the masses, to where they are. And when you think about people that are thinking even about this gender ideology and maybe are struggling with their own children who are coming home having been indoctrinated that they can choose their own sex, and mum and dad start using my preferred pronouns, we need to be on those platforms. They will be looking for information online. They'll be looking through their feeds, looking for groups that can help them. We need to be in that space. And I'm so grateful for, Help Not Harm providing that resource. We want to be there as well. Focus on the Family. The FPCs are just doing an amazing group. I'm just, so proud to sort of be unofficially aligned with them. We need to be in the space. I always say to myself, Joseph, we won't win every battle, but we'll lose every battle that we don't even show up to. And we've got to be in these battles. We're not always called to win, but we are called to speak truth. And in my view, our culture desperately needs truth. It is just so confused and muddled now. And that's why, mental harm and mental stress is going through the roof, because people just don't know what truth is anymore. That's our job. We need to start filling that space.
Amen. I mean, God entrusts his people to be stewards of his truth. And G.K. Chesterton said, sometimes the first duty of the Christian is to state the obvious. I feel like we're in one of those times where feels hard sometimes, but we can't complain when that's really what we're being asked to do in this issue area. So thank you for telling our audience about all of that. We're going to link to your website, to your social media in our show notes for this show. And I'll just recommend that to our audience. Bob, Family First New Zealand, are a great ex-follow. So by all means, go find them there. But Bob, just thank you for joining me today for this episode of House to Home. Congratulations again. What a huge victory that you guys just so deserve many times over. And we're going to be praying for more and more victories for you in the coming years, that New Zealand would come back to Christ and come back to social conservatism. And I just want to thank our audience. If you agree with Bob and I, maybe you're hearing all of this for the first time, but you agree that children shouldn't be experimented on like this, I would encourage you to learn more about Family Policy Alliance's Help Not Harm campaign. We'll link to the campaign website in our show notes, but you can see all the progress we've made, including in places like New Zealand through Bob and his great work. You can find all of that at fpaf.com. You can also follow us on social media at family_policy. And if you liked this show, please feel free to click follow or subscribe. We're here every Wednesday. Usually my co-host, Grace Youngson, is with me. It's just me and Bob today. But Bob, this has been a great conversation, so I just want to thank you again for joining us.
Hey, great to be with you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. We'll see you again soon. And to our audience, we'll see you again next week for the next episode of House to Home.